Shadow Slave Chapter 229, The Passenger. The Colossus rose from beneath the turbulent waves, rivers of black water streaming down his stone body. Now that the walking statue had climbed out of the canyon, the cursed sea was barely up to its abdomen, for the moment. Once the dark waters reached higher, the giant would be submerged in them up to his shoulders once again. Sunny had to get rid of the unwelcomed passenger until then. Far below, flattened against the chest of the Colossus, a strange creature had attached itself to the ancient statue. It looked like a cross between a translucent jellyfish and an eel. However, Sunny could see a deformed skeleton of a giant humanoid being trapped within the transparent flesh of the repulsive abomination. He shivered. Compared to the stone giant, the eel looked rather small. However, this was just an illusion. Really, the creature was as large as a train. Its jaws were full of sharp fangs, and wide enough to swallow a human whole. Curses. If there was one good thing about the situation, it was that the eel did not seem to be a corrupted nightmare creature, but merely a fallen one. Perhaps it survived in the cursed sea by attaching itself to the true terrors of the depths and feeding off the remains of their prey. As soon as Nephis spoke, Sunny noticed long feelers of the creature tremble and move, as though reacting to the sudden sound. The eel turned its head slightly in their direction. When he answered, the feelers rippled once again, and the monstrosity turned its head once more, this time staring directly at Sunny. Crap! A moment later, translucent tentacles appeared from beneath the abomination's body and shot up, finding cracks in the weathered stone and pulling it toward the neck of the Colossus, where the cohort was. Changing Star must have felt something, because tiny white sparks suddenly ignited in the depths of her eyes. Sunny put a hand on her shoulder and shook his head. Don't. Stone giant or not, lighting a beacon in the middle of the cursed sea was not the best of ideas. Now that it had escaped the confines of the canyon, the real horrors were out and about. Just like the cohort had discussed before, light was their last resort, something they would summon only if the moment came where there was no other choice, but for all of them to fight. And whether Sunny liked it or not, that moment was not upon them yet. With a reluctant scowl, he turned away and said, "I'll handle it." The giant eel was his problem to solve. Yeah, that's great and all. But how the spell am I supposed to get rid of this thing? Looking down, Sunny calculated that he had a dozen or so seconds left before it was time to act. The repulsive abomination was slowly crawling toward them, scaling the torso of the giant statue at a disturbingly steady pace. Think. Several seconds later, Sunny approached Effie and kneeled by her side. Taking the huntress by the hand, he put something into her palm and said, "Do you feel the Colossus moving up and down? That's his steps. I need you to start counting them. If I'm not back after 30 steps, throw the thing I gave you in that direction as hard as you can. All right." Effie gave him a nod. Her usual humor was gone, replaced by grim determination. Good. Well, wish me luck. The huntress lingered for a moment and then said, "Good luck." When he was ready to walk away, she suddenly gripped his arm. Sunny stopped and raised an eyebrow. "What?" Effie hesitated before speaking. "Listen, Sunny, if you die, I can have your soul shards, right?" He stared at her for a second, his face twitching. "This wench? Absolutely not. If I die, all my shards are to be thrown into the sea. No one is to get anything, understand?" With that, he left the cohort behind and walked to the edge of the swaying stone platform. "Here goes nothing." Jumping down, Sunny slid to the giant's shoulder and caught himself from falling all the way into the raging waves by grabbing onto a crack in the stone. To his right, the shoulder was slowly moving as the Colossus swung his hand. To his left, a curved path of stone led all the way across the chest of the statue to its other shoulder. This curving path was, in fact, the collar of the giant's tunic, carved masterfully from stone by the unknown sculptor. Stepping on it, Sunny struggled to keep his balance on the swaying slippery surface and hurried forward. Soon, he was directly above the climbing eel. The abomination was already close, allowing Sunny to discern every repugnant detail of its translucent, giant body. What the hell? Why does everything have to be so disgusting? A moment later, he sighed. Let's try this. Summoning the prowling thorn, Sunny gritted his teeth and cut his forearm, smearing some blood on the blade of the kunai. Then, he used all the strength he had in his body to hurl the dagger down. The prowling thorn spun in the air and hit the giant eel right in the place where its eye should have been. Sunny did not notice any visual organs on the creature's body, but on the deformed humanoid skull hiding beneath the flesh, that's where the eye socket was. The kunai wedged itself deep into the monster's head, causing a small fountain of crimson blood to erupt upward. Of course, such a tiny wound was nothing for a creature of this size. For a moment, everything became silent. Then, hundreds of slender tentacles suddenly exploded from the eel's flesh and shoot in Sunny's direction in a chaotic, slithering mass of translucent flesh. Damn it! Reaching the end of the path and with nowhere left to run, Sunny cursed and jumped straight into the darkness. Previous index next. Copyright symbol. Shadow Slave Chapter 230, Precarious Battle. The eel tried to catch him, but was a second too late. Crap! Falling toward the dark waves, Sunny threw the kunai in the direction of the stone giant's hand. Instead of a weapon, the Colossus was holding a tool that resembled a mason's hammer. The kunai curved in the air and wrapped the invisible string around its shaft. This is going to hurt. Sunny plunged into the darkness. A moment later, the string grew taut, and he found himself swinging through the air at a terrible speed. Flying underneath the colossal stone fist, he almost touched the black water with his feet, but then the inertia pulled him up and away. After a few seconds of weightlessness, Sunny landed on the hammer's head and let out a shaky breath. Without wasting any time, he dislodged the prowling thorn and pulled it into his hand, then wedged the dagger in a narrow crack on the surface of the giant hammer. Landing on it was one thing. Staying here, though, that was something else entirely. The Colossus was swinging his arms as he walked, so Sunny basically found himself on top of a giant pendulum. Not only was the hammer swaying back and forth, but the angle of the surface he was standing on also constantly changed, making it hard not to fly off or slid into the raging sea. Almost kneeling, Sunny held onto the kunai and tried to keep himself from falling. Then, His face pale and grim, he looked up and glanced at the eel. "I'm right here, you slimy worm." The abomination lingered for a few moments, considering whether it should continue to climb up or follow the sound made by the prey. Finally, it twisted its long, repulsive body and slid over the shoulder of the giant, crawling down his arm toward Sunny. "Come on, come on." He was hoping that his blood will have the same effect on the giant eel as it had on the corpse eater. Both were, presumably, fallen creatures. If one was poisoned to death by blood weave, why couldn't the other? Sunny had not cut himself with the prowling thorn for the fun of it. Sadly, his blood seemed to have no effect on the eel whatsoever. The monster continued to pursue its prey without showing any signs of being poisoned. So, it's not poisonous, really. It just tore that leech from inside, because the stupid thing swallowed a whole lot, and the weave imbued my blood with the odd quality of always being attracted back to the larger mass of it. The corpse eater's innards were in the way, so... damn it. His hopes of killing the eel were crushed. Now, Sunny was stuck on the swinging hammer, with his only path of escape blocked by the swiftly approaching abomination. Damn it all. Letting go of the kunai, Sunny summoned the midnight shard and slashed at the slender tentacle that approached him. Even enhanced by the shadow, the blade of the tachi failed to cut the flesh of the fallen creature, and instead simply batted it away. Not good, not good. The eel had two types of tentacles. Some were thick, powerful, and few in number. These ones were used to push its massive body forward and hold onto the swinging arm of the colossus. The other tentacles were slender, long, and numerous. These were the ones that Sunny now had to dodge and fight against. The closer the eel got, the more tentacles assaulted Sunny from all sides. Dodging and deflecting them while maintaining his balance on the chaotically swinging hammer was an almost impossible task. Luckily, Sunny had practiced the firm battle style of the Stone Saint and incorporated it into his own technique. Its steadiness and indomitability were translated through grounded footwork, which allowed him to plant himself on the stone surface of the hammer and refuse to be thrown off, or moved even by an inch. Between choking breaths, Sunny couldn't help but think that Nephis was right. The best fighters weren't those who were the strongest, but those who were the most adaptable. The foundational style he had learned from her had served him well on the streets of the Dark City. But if he had continued to follow it narrowly and neglected to add flexibility to his technique by incorporating the Stone Saint style into it, he would be dead by now. The dream realm was wild, unpredictable, and often defied logic. It threw all kinds of horrors at those unfortunate enough to step foot inside its vast expanse. Take this situation, for example. What kind of a person would imagine that, one day, they would have to fight a translucent eel the size of a train atop a walking stone colossus? Sunny certainly never expected to find himself in such a situation. Only a complete lunatic would. That's why adaptability was the most important trait an awakened fighter could possess. But even though Sunny had taken all the right steps, the seconds he had left to live were numbered. The onslaught of the slender tentacles was already too much for him to handle. And they were only growing in number. 28. With an inaudible sigh, Sunny allowed the shadow to slide off his body and rushed toward the approaching eel. Instantly weakened, he gritted his teeth and tried to resist the attacking tentacles as best as he could. One of them hit against the blade of the midnight shard with tremendous force, sending it flying from his hand into the darkness of the night. The other hit him across the chest, causing Sunny to yelp in pain and roll back, almost sliding off the surface of the hammer. Catching himself at the last moment, he pushed away and rolled, barely avoiding being pierced through the chest by the third. He had nowhere to retreat anymore. but it was fine. 29. Back at the circular platform, Effie strained her muscles and hurled the thing entrusted to her by Sunny into the air. It was the ordinary rock. Flying away, the memory suddenly screamed. 30 steps. Its loud scream caused the feelers on the eel's head to ripple. The giant creature suddenly turned its head in the direction of the noise, its terrifying maw opening in hunger. For a moment, it paid Sunny no attention. Its weight also shifted, leaning over the abyss of black water. Right then, a human shadow glided right in front of it, and two crimson eyes ignited in its depths. The stone saint stepped out of the shadow, which then instantly wrapped itself around the taciturn monster, and filled her with immeasurable power. The shadow's sword flashed. Sunny wasn't trying to kill the eel. Despite all of the stone saint's might, she was too weak to slay something that abominable. He just wanted to sever one of the main tentacles that supported most of the eel's weight. Augmented with the power of shadows, the stone knight easily cut into the flesh of the eel and sliced one of the thickest tentacles apart. Losing its purchase, the repulsive creature shuddered, and slid helplessly from the swinging arm of the colossus, falling into the turbulent black waves with a splash. Then, it was gone, pulled away by the strong current. Sunny fell to his knees and drew in a deep breath. Then, he said in a cold, raspy voice, "This ride ain't free, bastard. Next time, buy a ticket." Previous index. Shadow Slave Chapter 231, Stone Giant. Sunny remained on the swinging hammer of the Colossus for a while, resting and trying to catch his breath. However, very soon, the dark sea rose high enough to make his position perilous. With a deep sigh, he stood up and dislodged the prowling thorn from the stones. Waiting for the Colossus to raise his hand, Sunny jumped down. The wind whistled in his ears, and a few moments later, he landed on the wrist of the giant in a roll. As soon as Sunny got back to his feet, the stone surface beneath plummeted down. Thrusting the kunai in another crack, he gritted his teeth and held on to his dear life. Soon, the ground he was standing on sloped down, and then turned into a vertical wall, with nothing but the dark abyss of the cursed sea visible below. Hanging off that wall, Sunny cursed and waited for the Colossus to bring his arm back up. When it finally happened, Sunny immediately dashed forward. He had several precious seconds before the pendulum swung again, and had to cover as much distance as possible with each swing of the giant's arm. Too slow, and the cursed sea would catch up to him. The closer he got to the elbow of the walking statue, the more inclined his path was. Eventually, Sunny had to climb instead of run. His hands were tired from fighting and supporting his weight, but he stubbornly continued moving forward and up. Once Sunny reached the elbow and climbed higher, the amplitude of the swinging reduced considerably. Now he just had to scale the vertical wall and reach the shoulder of the giant. Climbing the slippery stone was not easy, but he had gotten used to such tasks a long time ago. In any case, it was way better than that time Sunny had to race against the rising sea during a furious storm, only to get swept away by the black water, and be saved by Nephis at the last moment. This time, at least, he didn't need her to save his life. That would be embarrassing. Sometime later, Sunny climbed over the edge of the circular platform, crawled to its center, and sprawled beside the other members of the cohort, who were waiting for his return with tense expressions on their faces. "Sunny, are you alright?" Kai was back to his senses, looking a little bit disheveled, but still ridiculously gorgeous. Sunny stared at him in dismay, then sighed. "I'm alive." A short while later, Nephis called out to him. "What were you fighting?" Sunny grimaced. A big ugly worm. I threw him back into the water. With that, he reluctantly sat up and looked at the surface of the dark sea, which was already flowing over the shoulders of the stone giant. Its surface was black and tranquil. No one was pursuing them, it seemed. It's gone now, so rest up. I'll keep watch. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He stayed awake until the break of dawn and then woke the members of the cohort. When they rose to their feet, Sunny lay down on the cold stone and tiredly closed his eyes. Yesterday, he had thought that he would not be able to fall asleep atop the walking stone giant. However, Sunny had underestimated how exhausting this long night would end up being. Even the body of a powerful sleeper needed rest. Actually, the swinging of the stone platform was sort of soothing. Soon, he was fast asleep. When Sunny woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. Yawning, he sat up, summoned the endless spring and greedily drank some water. Someone had left a plate of food near him, so without thinking too much, Sunny picked it up and had himself a late breakfast. Ah, that hits the spot. Recognizing the taste of Nefer's cooking, he glanced at their intrepid leader and smiled. It was nice to laze around while others were working. While Sunny was sleeping, the stone platform had transformed. Plates of iron stripped of the abominable spiders and stored in Effie's bag were inserted around its perimeter, with the golden rope strung between them as an improvised railing. More of these plates were shaped into makeshift rods and placed in the center to serve as throwing spears in case the cohort was attacked from the air. Currently, Kai and Effie were building additional battlements on the left shoulder of the giant, while Nephis observed their progress from above. They were taking no chances. A trip through the labyrinth, no matter how fantastical, was still full of danger. It was better to be safe than sorry. Sunny scoffed. So much work. What's the word? No. I'm not going to finish that thought. No thanks. On the stone beside him, the shadow applauded sarcastically. Shaking his head, Sunny finished his food in silence and moved to the edge of the platform to look down at the vista of the forgotten shore. Far below, the landscape of the labyrinth was slowly moving past them. The stone giant was marching south, indifferently crushing mountains of crimson coral under his feet with each step. The view was simultaneously hypnotic and depressing. In every direction, as far away as Sunny could see, there was nothing but red coral, with rare heights protruding from it into the grey skies here and there. The forgotten shore was truly vast, and every inch of it was full of unspeakable dangers. Not too far from him, Caster was also busy studying the landscape. However, his interest wasn't purely idle. Changing Star's map was on the stones beside him, and the proud legacy was drawing new marks on it from time to time. Sunny sighed. The cohort might have caught a ride on the shoulder of the stone giant to reach their destination at the edges of the forgotten shore, but they were going to have to walk all the way back to the dark city by themselves. That was months of traveling through this treacherous hellscape, with nothing but their own strength and wit to keep them alive. The information Caster was putting on the map today was going to be priceless to them in the future. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Right now, Sunny deserved a little respite. Turning away from the handsome young man, he lowered his gaze and peered at the sights below. It was not every day that one got an opportunity to enjoy a beautiful view of hell. Shadow Slave Chapter 232, Before the Storm. In the next few hours, Sunny did nothing but leisurely gaze at the vistas of the labyrinth. While monotonous, they were still picturesque and breathtaking. The forgotten shore was a harrowing, but beautiful place. The somber gray sky and the black earth created a perfect backdrop for the vibrant crimson sea of twisting coral glades. Here and there, strange landmarks broke the dullness of the landscape, igniting the flames of curiosity in Sunny's heart. After all, he was nothing if not a passionate explorer. Provided, most of his explorations ended with something dying at the end of his blade. But still, out there in the depths of the labyrinth, Sunny saw many things that piqued his interest. The skeletal remains of colossal monsters, with signs of ferocious battles written in the marks on their bones. Broken wrecks of giant vessels, with terrible breaches in their mighty hulls. Abyssal chasms that were full of darkness and emptiness, leading into the depths of this cursed land where true horrors dwelt. And things he couldn't even describe, let alone identify. He even saw several vast ruins that must have been entire cities once. Now, only unclear shapes of magnificent buildings remained, overgrown with crimson coral and barely resembling anything made by a human hand. He didn't know if they had existed before or simultaneously with the Dark City. Regardless, it seemed that no other human settlement on the Forgotten Shore had withstood the curse of darkness, as the cursed city had. They were all destroyed and devoured, first by the crimson coral, then by the ruthless flow of time. Now, no one was left to remember that these proud cities had ever existed. The 7 heroes that created the Starlight Legion were described as those born in all-consuming darkness. That suggested that humans had resisted the curse for a while at least. Maybe the Dark City was built long after the darkness had devoured this land, as the last sanctuary and fortress for those who remained. A lot of good had that done, in the end. His reverie was broken by Cassie, who suddenly turned south and frowned. Her quick movement drew everyone's attention. Sunny instantly had a bad feeling. Nephis turned to the blind girl and frowned. Cassie, do you feel something? Cassie lingered for a few moments and then said, her voice uncertain, I think a storm is coming. Sunny looked at the sky, which like always was covered in a grey veil of clouds. Nothing seemed to indicate that there was going to be a tempest turning it impenetrably dark and furious soon. But that was just how things worked on the Forgotten Shore. Storms came out of nowhere and destroyed everyone unfortunate enough to be caught in their murderous embrace. If Cassie said that she felt one approaching, then it was. Their oracle had a good track record of sensing such things. Damn. A storm meant that the cursed sea would rise from the depths earlier than usual. It also meant that there would be rain and lightning, which would make the behavior of the dwellers of the depths unpredictable. It also meant hurricane winds. And that was really bad news when you were stuck on a moving colossus 200 meters above the ground. Nephis gritted her teeth. You heard her. Prepare. However, the blind girl interrupted her. Wait. There is something else. Changing Star lingered for a moment, then asked. You are sensing another threat. Cassie scowled, then said in a strange tone. No, not sensing. I can hear something strange. It's like a rustle. Everyone stared at her for a few seconds, trying to understand the meaning behind her words. Strangely, Kai was the first one to react. Suddenly pale, he spun around and summoned his bow. Before anyone could understand what was happening, something whistled in the air, and a dark shape forcefully crashed into the stone platform, smearing it with blood. A black arrow was protruding from its body. Sunny jumped out of the way and gasped, stunned by the force with which the monster impacted against the stone. It had to have been in a long dive before being pierced by Kai's arrow, mere moments away from snatching one of them away. The creature looked somewhat like a giant locust. Its body was covered in black chitin and comparatively small, no bigger than that of an adult human. Its wide wings were thin and transparent. As it convulsed in death throes, the wings moved, threatening to push the members of the cohort off of the platform. Nephis dashed forward, grabbed the disgusting creature, and threw it down. Kai was already grabbing another arrow. There was an expression of panic on his face. Sunny blinked. Why is he panicking? The monster is all ready. As though hearing his thoughts, Kai glanced at the members of the cohort with wide eyes and yelled. Swarms. These fiends hunt in swarms. Get ready. Before he could finish, Sunny was already summoning the Midnight Shard and the Stone Saint. Dead. By now, everyone could hear the rustling sound Cassie had told them about. It seemed to be coming from nowhere, surrounding them like a wave. For a few moments, nothing happened. The members of the cohort tensely stared up. Why? Suddenly, a black dot appeared in the grey clouds and swiftly fell down, covering the distance to the neck of the Colossus almost instantly. Before it could attack, though, Effie's spear collided with it. The giant locust practically exploded, sending a rain of blood splattering against the stone back of the Colossus. But by the time the huntress dismissed her spear, and before she had the time to summon it again, there was another dot, and another, and another. Kai shot one more creature out of the air, while Caster used a strange sling he summoned from his soul seed to break the wings of another. Nephis raised her sword and yelled. Cassie. Wind. Flinching, the blind girl began to call upon her wooden staff. While white sparks of light were still weaving the shape of it in her hands, the quiet dancer flew out of its scabbard by itself and flashed into the air, piercing an approaching locust clean through. A few moments later, a powerful gale shot from the wooden staff into the skies, slowing the attacking locusts down and sending them staggering. One of these stragglers somehow managed to land on the platform and immediately jumped at Sunny. Changing his stance on the fly, Sunny slashed with his sword, decapitating the repulsive creature. However, because of the inertia, the massive body continued to move forward, slamming into him at great speed. With a curse, Sunny flew back and fell over the railing. Sliding on the stone, he rolled down to the stone giant's shoulder and caught himself on the part of the defensive fence built by Effie and Kai. Then, he stood up and spat a mouthful of blood. A moment later, Sunny froze, his eyes widening. Because of the tumble, he accidentally looked down to the ground. What he saw there made him shiver. Numerous dark shapes were appearing from the labyrinth and jumping at the Colossus, swiftly climbing up his giant stone body. Previous index next. Shadow Slave Chapter 233, Swarm. As the members of the cohort killed several giant locusts, their repulsive black bodies fell to the ground, raining blood on the walking colossus and the crimson coral of the labyrinth. As soon as their corpses hit the ground, it suddenly moved. Dark figures appeared from beneath the mud, rushing at the dead locusts to devour them. Hundreds of monsters were suddenly competing for the few scraps of meat. After several bloody fights broke out and the winners were decided, those who had not gotten to satiate their hunger turned their heads and followed the smell of blood. Right back to the moving stone giant. Looking down with dark resentment, Sunny saw numerous creatures jumping at the legs of the walking statue from the mounds of coral and quickly climbing up. They were headed right to where the cohort was being besieged by the swarm of winged abominations. He couldn't see the shape of them clearly, but there was no doubt that these monsters were bad news. Damnation. Slain an awakened beast, Flesh Reaver. Your shadow grows stronger. Turning around, Sunny summoned the prowling thorn and hurled it upward. A moment later, using the invisible string as support, he was flying through the air. Grabbing onto the edge of the circular platform, he hoisted himself up and once again faced the carnage. The kunai flashed, cutting the wing of one of the locusts clean off. Suddenly crippled, the creature toppled and plummeted down, no doubt to be devoured by the horde of nightmare creatures approaching from below. The battle with the swarm was not going too great for the cohort. The turbulent winds summoned by Cass's staff bought them some breathing room by making it hard for the locusts to approach the platform at high speed, but there were just too many of them. Kai was setting one arrow after another loose. After that one first shot, he had not used the blood arrow, choosing instead to rely on his mundane ones. In the chaotic mess of this sudden battle, it was too easy to miss. Plus, he didn't need a lot of power to deliver debilitating wounds to the locusts. They were basically skewering themselves on the arrows themselves by diving from the skies with incredible speed. Still, the abominable reavers were awakened beasts. It wasn't easy for a sleeper to kill one with just a single shot. Just as Sunny grabbed the kunai and spun to avoid a glancing blow from one of the creatures, another one landed on the platform. 2 arrows were sticking from its cracked chitin, but the locust was still alive. Not for long, though. Just a moment after the repulsive bug landed, Nefer's sword flashed through the air, slicing it in half. Sending the mangled body off the platform with a powerful kick, Changing Star turned to Kai and yelled, "Don't try to kill them. Break their wings." With a sudden light of understanding in his eyes, the archer changed his approach. Indeed, that made sense. The members of the cohort didn't need to slay the locusts. They just needed to make it so the flying scourges weren't able to reach the stone platform. Effie, meanwhile, did not need this advice. Everything she hit simply exploded into a disgusting puddle of bloody goo. The problem the huntress faced was that there was no powerful ranged weapon she could use. Her beautiful spear was not really suited to be thrown that often. The memories were created from soul essence. Once a memory was dismissed, that essence returned to the core of the awakened that had summoned it. However, if it was too far away from them, the essence was simply wasted, unless the memory had a special enchantment like that of the blood arrow. The essence wasn't lost forever, as it would slowly accumulate inside the soul core until the peak capacity was reached once again. But this process took time, so one could not endlessly throw their memories at the enemy during a battle. Especially not once they reached a rank where managing one's soul essence was of higher importance. Effie had not reached such a rank yet, but she was still limited by that principle. That's why she resorted to using makeshift darts fashioned out of plates of spider iron. There wasn't much of them left, however. Once the last dart was gone, she would have to either exhaust her full soul essence or risk fighting the attacking locusts in melee. Just like the Stone Saint was doing right now. As Sunny rushed toward Nephis, he noticed the shadow lowering her shoulder and raising her shield. In the next moment, one of the repulsive creatures crashed into it at full speed and simply crumbled, black blood exploding into the air through the cracks in the shattered chitin. You have slain. The huntress, however, did not have the benefit of weighing a literal ton. Despite her graceful appearance, the saint was made out of stone, and stone was much heavier than flesh. It was also much harder to rip and slice apart. Once Effie was forced to fight the locusts with nothing but her spear and shield, her life would be in real danger. Curses, curses, curse it all. Swiftly approaching Changing Star, Sunny kicked a disgusting piece of a killed creature off the platform and yelled, "We have a problem." Nephis sharply looked at him and scowled. "What?" Sunny hesitated for a moment and then gestured down. "There's a couple of 100 labyrinth creatures crawling all over the Colossus. They'll be here pretty soon." Nephis gritted her teeth, then glanced at the members of the cohort. Cassie was holding the wooden staff, sending powerful bursts of wind into the sky to slow down the attacking swarm. The quiet dancer was flashing through the air, protecting her from the locusts to the best of its ability. Castor was spinning his strange sling, aiming at the wings of the repulsive creatures. His face was calm and grim. Everyone was barely holding on and one mistake away from death. With a dark look in her cold grey eyes, Nephis looked at Sunny. Then, she said, "Come with me, then." Previous index next. User comments. Shadow Slave Chapter 234, Horde. Briefly giving Caster a few instructions, Nephis walked over to the edge of the platform and looked down. When she saw the numerous creatures climbing the stone giant, a grim expression appeared on her face. Sunny weighed the prowling thorn in his hand and asked, "So, what's the plan?" Changing Star glanced at him and smiled darkly. "What else? Kill as many as you can." With that, she jumped down and landed softly on the shoulder of the Colossus. With a sigh, Sunny followed. Figures. A moment later, they separated. Nephis dashed to the opposite side of the moving statue, running on the wide stone part of its collar. She was going to try and deal with those creatures that were climbing the front and the left side of the giant. Sunny was going to have to stop those coming from the right and the back. He wasn't sure that just two of them were going to be enough to cover all that space, but they didn't have a lot of choices. Sunny and Nephis at least had the high ground advantage against the enemy. Those fighting against the swarm of monstrous locusts, however, did not. The cohort couldn't spare anyone else for this task. Looking down, he was finally able to discern the shape of the attacking labyrinth dwellers. They looked like massive primates covered in dirty, grey fur. Their arms were strong and muscular, easily pulling their heavy bodies up the ancient stone surface. Each had a mouth full of sharp teeth, with two curved tusks protruding from it, as long as daggers. The most disturbing fact about these beasts was that there were crimson flowers growing from within the bloody gaps in their flesh. Some even had pale stems slithering from one eye socket to another. With a shiver, Sunny realized that this tribe of nightmare creatures was simply hosts for a different, much more terrifying one. The primates were nothing but meat puppets for those ghoulish flowers. Oh gods! Summoning the ordinary rock, Sunny wrapped his body in the shadow, strained his muscles, and threw it down as hard as he could. The small rock plunged through the air and collided with one of the creatures far below, hitting it right in the forehead and splitting its rotten skull apart. Not paying any attention to the fact that half of its head was missing, the primate continued climbing up. First primate climbed into the range of the prowling thorn. Something thundered above Sunny, and in the next moment, he was doused from head to toe in fetid black blood. A mangled corpse of a giant locust flew past him and fell down. Sunny frozen for a second, then growled. "I am a walking target now, aren't I? Well, great. Let them come. The more, the merrier." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Extending the invisible string to its maximum length, Sunny aimed and hurled the kunai down. He guided it by ever so slightly pulling on the string. The dagger flashed through the air and spun, drawing a curved path. A few moments later, it cut across the wrist of one of the menacing primates, cleanly severing its hand. Suddenly losing purchase, the beast instantly fell down. After plummeting from the deadly height, it hit the crimson corals below and practically exploded into bloody chunks. Sunny listened to the emptiness, a tense expression on his face. "You have slain an awakened monster, Bloodflower. Your shadow grows stronger." A relieved expression appeared on his face. At least these things weren't indestructible. Raising a hand, he caught the returning kunai and instantly threw it again. There wasn't much time left. Countless beasts were climbing up the stone body of the ancient colossus, covering a frightening amount of distance with each second. He had to slaughter as many of them as he could before they reached the battlement constructed on the giant's shoulder, or else they were going to rip him apart. In the next few minutes, Sunny did nothing but control the prowling thorn as it flew through the air, cutting through flesh and bone alike. The heavy kunai never stayed in his hand for more than a second, reaping a bountiful harvest of lives. More than a dozen beasts, those who were ahead of the approaching horde, were thrown off the statue and fell to their deaths, rewarding Sunny with an enviable amount of shadow fragments. However, he was still too slow. Sunny had to be both swift and precise when throwing the dagger, lest he wanted to be pulled off the giant's swaying shoulder himself. What's worse, he had to constantly pay attention to the sky and dodge the attacking locusts when they dove from above to devour him. The horde of terrible beasts was getting closer and closer, their arrival as inevitable as it would be fatal. The situation got even worse when another group of them reached the gargantuan statue's back. Now, Sunny not only had to deal with the monsters climbing its side, but also rushed from his perch on the shoulder of the steadily moving colossus to the treacherous path of his collar to prevent the fastest climbers from reaching too high. Bad, bad, this is bad. Covered in blood and with his muscles burning, Sunny continued to slaughter the ghastly beasts as fast as he could. But he wasn't fast enough. At some point, Sunny realized that the climbing monstrosities were now mere meters away from him. He could see every disturbing detail of their rotting bodies, with strangely graceful flowers growing from the bloody gaps. Their crimson petals trembled as they smelled prey. Suddenly, one of the primates strained its powerful legs and jumped into the air, instantly covering the remaining distance to Sunny's position. Before it could land, however, the midnight shard slashed the creature across its massive body, cutting it apart. What flowed out of the terrible wound, however, was not blood, but a vast cloud of red pollen. Before Sunny could register the fact, he had already breathed in a whole lungful of it. His eyes widened. Oh no. This is not good. Previous index next. User comments. Shadow Slave Chapter 235, Flower Boy. As the red pollen settled in his lungs, Sunny suddenly sensed something subtly moving inside them. Then, A wave of excruciating pain pierced his chest. With a loud scream, he fell to his knees and grabbed at the puppeteer's shroud. A stream of blood escaped from his mouth and splashed on the ancient stone. In it, tiny blooms were sprouting roots, greedily drinking the crimson liquid and growing with visible speed. Looking at them with dark resentment, Sonny gritted his teeth and slowly stood up. By the time he straightened his back, the pain had subsided a little. The bloodthirsty flowers were already turning black and dying, destroyed by the odd blessing of the blood weed. The insidious nightmare creature tried to devour him from inside, but really, it just signed its own death sentence. In a few short minutes, it would be destroyed completely by the furnace of his tenacious body. And even if some part of it survived, Nefer's purifying flames were going to finish the job. Until then, he would just have to endure this torture. Come closer, you bastards. As the midnight shard appeared in his hands, another monster was already climbing onto the shoulder of the walking colossus. Lunging forward, Sonny brandished his sword and decapitated the foul creature, then kicked it in the chest to send it flying down. A moment later, he jumped back, narrowly avoiding being grabbed by another primate. Before the beast could even react, the razor-sharp tattoo flashed across its body, severing both of its arms. More red pollen burst into the air. Holding his breath, Sonny shifted his stance and attacked once again in one swift, fluid motion. The midnight shard pierced the knee of the massive primate, making it topple. The creature wasn't dead, but any kind of mobility it once had was pretty much gone. Good enough. But it didn't really matter. 3 other monsters were already dead, ready to take the fallen creature's place. And a few seconds later, there was going to be even more of them, and then even more still, until, eventually, Sonny was torn apart by the unstoppable flood of these harrowing fiends. He would have to think of something before that happened. If only I could breathe. Fighting through the excruciating pain that was tearing him from inside, Sonny grimaced and dashed forward to face the enemies. In the next minute or so, he forced himself to cut out all unnecessary thoughts, turning into a ruthless hurricane of steel. The midnight shard danced from one nightmare creature to another, piercing, slashing, and severing their rotting flesh. The air was soon obscured by a vast cloud of red pollen. At some point, Sonny gritted his teeth and disengaged from the fight, leaving a carpet of bleeding bodies in his wake. Launching himself back a few meters, he slid on the stone and left the cloud of red mist. Only then, finally, he allowed himself to draw in a deep breath. Sensing that their enemy was gone, the primates rushed forward. However, a moment later, something glistened in the mist, and a heavy triangular blade suddenly pierced the head of the leading creature. The blood flower did not react to its host being damaged and continued its lunge. But in the next second, the head of the monstrous ape was violently jerked backward, and losing balance, it fell down. The string of the prowling thorn was coiled around the support pillars of the makeshift battlement, creating an invisible trap. By moving forward with the kunai still stuck in its skull, the unfortunate creature pulled the string taut, causing an invisible net to rise into the air. Entangled in it, half a dozen creatures tumbled to the ground, blocking the others from pursuing Sonny. Neither the battlement nor the invisible string were going to last long, but at least it bought him a few seconds. You have slain an awakened monster, Blood Flower. Your shadow. Finally. The nightmare creature in his lungs was finally dead. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Sonny groaned, wiped his lips, and glanced back. What he saw made him curse. The group of monstrous primates climbing the back of the colossus was about to reach the collar of the stone tunic. Sonny was about to be surrounded. and he was all out of ideas. If I die today, I am at least going to drag as many of you as possible with me into a deeper, darker hell. Prepare yourselves, gangrels. Lunging forward, he ran on the narrow stone path, and got to the middle of the giant's back, just in time to collide with the first of the advancing primates, and send it flying all the way down to the distant surface of the labyrinth. Unlike the shoulder of the Colossus, Sunny had no room to maneuver on the narrow path. In fact, he was having trouble simply keeping his balance due to the constant swaying. But the primates, with their wide shoulders and mighty frames, were in an even worse situation than him. On that narrow stone path, one man would be able to stop an entire army. Provided that nothing attacked him from behind, of course. Which was bound to happen. Cursing, Sunny slashed and slashed, sending one monster tumbling down in a billowing cloud of red pollen after another. Despite all his efforts, he had to retreat step after step to avoid being surrounded and killed by the ferocious abominations. The situation was becoming desperate. Especially so, because the creatures that had been slowed down for a bit by the string of the prowling thorn finally wrestled free of it, and were seconds away from reaching his current position. Damnation! Sending a primate that was facing him staggering with a devastating blow of the midnight shard, Sunny desperately spun to deflect the attack from the creature approaching him from the back. However, he was a fraction of a second too late. Realizing that he won't be able to block or dodge the paw of the monstrous ape, Sunny feverishly tried to come up with a way to minimize the damage, at least. But just as the claws of the creature were about to grab onto his neck, a swift shadow suddenly fell from the skies. Catching the primate with its sharp mandibles, one of the locusts easily tore its head off and dashed back, devouring the prey with terrifying speed as it flew. In the next moment, more flesh weavers fell from the skies, aiming at the climbing primates. The two tribes of nightmare creatures were suddenly locked in a ferocious battle, with the 6 humans hopelessly stuck in between. Previous index next. Shadow Slave Chapter 236, Ex Machina. With his back to the stone surface of the ancient statue, Sunny stared as the two tribes of nightmare creatures clashed in a cacophony of eerie roars and rustling noises. Discovering a new target, swarming locusts swiftly fell from the skies and cut into the horde of the bloodflower hosts, devouring scores of unfortunate primates in mere moments. Torn and eviscerated by the sharp mandibles, their flesh seemed to almost melt in the terrible maws of the flying abominations. However, the massive beasts were not entirely defenseless. Any locust that lingered for a fraction of a second more than it should have was immediately grabbed and torn to pieces by the powerful primates, its black blood falling like dew on the petals of the crimson flowers that grew from their rotting bodies. Some hosts even jumped off the colossus to grab onto diving reavers and tumble together to the distant ground. In just a few seconds, the surface of the ancient giant and the air around him was consumed by utter chaos. Indifferent to everything, the colossus steadily marched south. Come to your senses. Shaking off his astonishment, Sunny swiftly finished off the primate that he had staggered a second before and pushed the heavy creature from the narrow path. Despite the fact that their enemies were now fighting each other, the pressure on the cohort did not decrease. In fact, it only grew heavier. Cursing under his breath, Sunny threw the midnight shard at another lunging monster, turned his back to the enemies, and jumped. Grabbing onto a crack in the ancient stone, he pulled his body up and nimbly scaled the neck of the ancient statue. For several seconds that seemed to last an eternity, Sunny was completely defenseless against the potential attacks by the monstrous locusts. However, to his luck, Nephis had chosen that exact moment to unleash her flames on the other side of the statue. A blinding flash of white drowned the skies for a second, confusing the reavers and buying him enough time to reach the stone platform. Climbing over its edge, Sunny rolled away and sprawled on the cold stone, trying to catch his breath. His body was in agony. The blood-weed might have destroyed the flower growing in his lungs, but the damage was already done. Sunny had trouble breathing and felt bloody foam bubbling on his lips. Every time he inhaled, a sharp pain pierced his entire being. Not too terrible. Although troublesome, these wounds were not going to kill him. Sleepers healed better and faster than mundane humans, and Sunny in particular was also transformed by the drop of Reaver's ichor, making him much tougher and harder to kill than most. Sort of like a cockroach. As for the pain, he had been through worse and survived. As long as Sunny had adrenaline numbing it to some degree, he was capable of giving a fight still. Not that it would be pleasant. With a moan, Sunny picked himself up from the ground and looked around. Things were slowly turning from bad to worse. Kai was long out of arrows and had to resort to using his morbid ascended memory. Judging by how pale his face was, he had already missed a few shots, losing a lot of blood as the result. Cassie was still trying to maintain the powerful wings that slowed the attacking locusts down, but her face and hands were covered in blood. It seemed that even the powerful enchantment of her armor and the ardent protection of the quiet dancer were not enough to fully save her from harm. Effie was now fighting the flying abominations in melee, having only a fraction of a second to react every time they attacked her. Blood was streaming down her legs, her white chiton torn and soaked with it. Her bronze helmet was gone, lying shattered on the stones. Caster did not seem to be wounded, but his face was dark with exhaustion. Maintaining his incredible speed was taxing on both the mind and the body, so he would not be able to last much longer, either. The Stone Saint was the Stone Saint. The taciturn shadow was covered in black blood from head to toe and completely indifferent to it, which only enhanced her dark and menacing visage. She continued to move with elegant grace, protecting the members of the cohort to the best of her ability. But she couldn't be everywhere all at once. And then there was Sunny himself, who was in the worst shape out of all of them by far. Curses. And the worst news was that now that he had to retreat back to the platform, the abominable primates were about to follow him, forcing the cohort to defend itself from two sides simultaneously. Even worse still, unlike Sunny, the other members didn't have bloodweed to protect them from the red pollen. Bad, bad, this is bad. Just as Sunny was thinking that thought, a blooded hand suddenly appeared from the other side of the platform. A moment later, Nephis slid under the golden rope and shakily rose to her feet. Changing Star had white flames dancing in her eyes. Her skin seemed to shine with a soft glow, as though there was fire burning beneath it. That fire, if Sunny had to guess, was responsible for annihilating the red pollen as soon as it entered her body. The Starlight Legion armor was heavily damaged and seemed to be on the verge of melting, but still held, protecting the last daughter of the Immortal Flame clan to the end. Not paying any attention to the members of the cohort, Nephis turned her head and looked south. What is she? Before Sunny could finish the thought, he was distracted by the sight of an ugly primate head rising above the edge of the circular platform. Cursing, he grabbed a jagged piece of chitin laying nearby and shoved it into the creature's eyes, forcibly pushing it back down. At the same moment, an especially large locust suddenly fell from the sky. Batting the quiet dancer away, it dug right for Cassie. Before anyone could react, its mandibles clicked. However, instead of soft flesh, all they caught was the hard wood of the enchanted star. The blind girl had managed to defend herself at the last moment. The impact was still strong enough to throw her far back, nevertheless. Breaking the improvised barrier with her back, Cassie screamed, and slipped from the platform, plummeting down like a broken doll. No. The prowling thorn was damaged and restoring itself in the Soul Sea, and the golden rope was tied around the platform. He didn't know what to. As the sound of a bow clattering on the stone reached his ears, Sunny saw Kai diving down from the neck of the Colossus. Flying with incredible speed, he caught up with Cassie and grabbed her by the arm. The two of them froze in the air for a moment, absolutely defenseless against the approaching locusts. No, no, no. But the fatal attack never came. Suddenly, the cacophony of the battle died down, turning into deathly silence. Sunny blinked. Several locusts were hovering in the air mere meters away from Cassie and Kai, but they were in no hurry to devour the helpless humans. In fact, they, too, seemed frozen. A moment later, the locusts suddenly turned around and dashed away. In fact, the whole swarm was swiftly retreating, flying away from the stone colossus with as much speed as the gluttonous abominations could muster. It was as if they were fleeing from something. Many of the locusts were carrying dead primates in their claws. It seemed as though the Reavers were the ultimate victors in this terrible battle against the monstrous apes. But Sunny was pretty sure that, soon, the whole tribe of these terrible creatures was going to have crimson blooms growing from the cracks in their chitin. Blood flowers were truly a horrifying enemy. Who knew what they would be capable of after subjugating the whole swarm of flying abominations? The more pressing question, however, was, what were the locusts running from? Sunny looked down, only to realize that the giant primates were also retreating, rushing down the body of the ancient statue in something that almost resembled panic. Then, finally, he turned and looked south, following the line of changing stars' gaze. His face paled. Out there, directly in the path of the walking statue, an inconceivably vast ball of furious darkness had devoured the whole world. It was swiftly moving in their direction, bolts of lightning illuminating the raging depths of clouds almost every second. The storm was approaching. Previous index next. User comments. Write comment. Please read and apply the rules before posting a comment. By sharing your comment, you agree to all the relevant terms. 5. Attempting tomfoolery. Shadow Slave Chapter 237, Wall of Darkness. Kai landed on the stone platform, gently placing Cassie down. The blind girl was deathly pale and visibly hurt, but her life didn't seem to be in danger. The archer smiled reassuringly and gripped her shoulder. Then, just like the rest of them, he turned his head and silently looked south. A wall of impenetrable, furious darkness was approaching from there, devouring vast spans of the labyrinth with each second. To Sunny, it felt like an endless ocean of deranged shadows was rushing to drown them. The pressure he felt was almost as bad as that of the ominous crimson spire. The Colossus was marching toward the darkness, completely indifferent to its menacing oppression. The wind rustled Sunny's hair. In the stunned silence, Effie suddenly fell to her knees with a pained groan. Her hands were pressed against the breach in her archaic cuirass, bright blood streaming from beneath them. That sound brought everyone back to reality. With a grim expression on her face, Nephis walked over to the wounded huntress and gently placed her hands on her body. A moment later, soft white radiance shone through the cracks of Effie's armor, healing her wounds and taking the pain away. Changing Star closed her eyes and bit her lip, drops of crimson blood rolling down her ivory skin. To take away her companion's suffering, she had to endure a much more harrowing torture. Sunny coughed, bloody foam flying from his lips, and weakly lowered himself to the ground. He didn't feel too well. The wall of darkness was growing closer with every moment. The wind was picking up, whistling in the cracks of the ancient statue. It brought the smell of the cedar. Sunny grimaced and commanded the stone saint to walk over and stand above him. What are we going to do now? Kai shivered, glanced at the raging wall of clouds, and said,